Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next session. So you've seen some of the demonstrations from our ventures. We're going to change tack a bit and go to a more casual conversation, have a fireside chat with our newly appointed chair of x15ventures, Ben Heap. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Apun.
Now, my name's Sapun. I head up strategy and operations for x15ventures. We've got about half an hour. And Ben, I'm really excited to get your perspectives on your recent appointment and the future of X15. Before we get there, though, for those who don't know you, who is Ben Heap and what's your role?
Sure. So I'm the independent chair of x15ventures, which means that I chair a board that has an oversight responsibility with respect to a range of activities that the business pursues. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but a bit on my background. I've worked in the banking industry for most of my career. Most interestingly, though, about 6 or 7 years ago, I stepped out of mainstream banking to start a private equity or a fintech-focused venture capital firm called x15ventures, which I formed with my brother. And we've invested in around 50 fintech ventures over the past 6 or 7 years, mainly here in Australia, including investing in well over 100 founders, which has been thoroughly enjoyable. There's something incredibly sort of vibrant about this community and about some of the businesses that those founders are seeking to build. And so X15 is terrific for me. It brings together those two things I really enjoy. On one hand, dealing with that sort of energy that comes from founders, from startup businesses. And on the other hand, doing that within an environment, within a big organisation that has the scale, the capability, the brand, that something like CBA has. And CBA, frankly, is the one that has the best opportunity, I think, to be really successful in this space. So really excited to be here.
Excellent. Ben, touching a bit more on the motivation for joining, tell me a little bit about what you see X15 as delivering an opportunity to CBA and our customers. Where do you think X15 can support that?
Yeah, look, really good question, and this was a big part for me in thinking about the role and thinking about how to be effective in the role. To me, one of the reasons that startups are so effective, are so successful, is because it's the very nature of starting from zero. It's the very nature of starting with no customers on day one, because that forces you to be acutely focused on the customer. And all startups, all successful startups, all founders are really naturally attuned to the customer and the customer's needs. Now, the challenge for large organisations is almost by their nature, a whole bunch of other complexity comes to running a very big organisation, and sometimes focus on the customer slips. The best organisations remember that and keep focusing back. The opportunity with X15 is to bring those two things together. So it's to bring together those startup founders with the energy they bring to the table and with their really acute focus on the customer, together with the large organisation and its scale, its ability to really build for scale. So that's what excites me most about X15. What I see as the real potential around X15 is to navigate, rather than the us and them of startups versus the big banks, to see the opportunity to really bring those two together. And I think there's a very clear focus on that within X15. We'll no doubt talk about that a little bit now, but I think that's the opportunity, and that's what excites me about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I can absolutely resonate with that as well. I think a lot of us in X15 have had experiences similar to yourself in working with startups, but working with a large corporate as well. And it's a very difficult kind of handshake to get right. It takes a lot of effort, I think. And one of the things I'm really excited about in the next year is understanding how we could do that in a much more industrialized way. And having someone with your capabilities as well is exciting to kind of go on that journey with. But some people here might be wondering, why do you need to have a separate board? And you've spoken a little bit about the innovator's dilemma and having X15 being a little separate to CBA. Can you touch a bit more about why you think that's valuable?
Yeah, sure. For those who don't know, there's a sort of a reasonably well-known construct or concept called the innovator's dilemma, originally coined by a Harvard professor named Clayton Christensen. Now, the innovator's dilemma at its heart goes to the idea that large organisations find it very difficult to reinvent themselves. They find it very difficult once they reach a point of business or product or service maturity to constantly challenge. And that often means that large organisations or particular business lines within large organisations just miss a change that's happened within society. And so you get these sort of these upstart competitors who arrive and really fundamentally disrupt. And an incredibly sort of opportune or example of that would be Kodak. Kodak is, as many will know, was a business that in the late 70s had 91% of the global camera market and 96% of the film market. So they absolutely owned, or almost a monopoly, the photography space. They there's the argument then goes that they missed the arrival of digital photography. And in fact, they didn't. In fact, they took out the original patent with respect to digital photography. But rather than seeing that as an opportunity to really completely disrupt what they do, the mindset became more of, well, let's sort of keep that under control so that doesn't disrupt what we do. It's really important for organisations to be successful, to be able to disrupt themselves. This idea of creative disruption is key to success. And I would argue that innovation is only accelerating in pace. And so whereas a large organisation may have had a decade or two to deal with incoming disruption, these days that can happen in a matter of a couple of years. And so X15 represents a very significant part of CBA's broader strategy, which is to be able to disrupt itself, to be able to actually identify what the future of the bank looks like and to take the bets it needs to take to get there more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we look at our portfolio now, we're on a 5-year journey. And we've got some ventures that aren't and nothing to do with banking, really. They're adjacencies that are fit quite nicely with CBA. And then I think the really exciting thing for us as well is to think through how we can reimagine even banking services as part of X15. Yeah, and we're at the start of our journey, as you know. But one of the exciting things for us is getting that operating model right, so that we can get that handshake. We can still get the support of CBA while still operating fast, operating nimbly, making decisions that are the right decisions for the ventures.
So I agree. And so I might throw a question back at you because you lead mission control, and I'll ask you to talk a little bit to mission control. But a key part of that, and a key part of X15's success over the coming years, will be that handshake. We've touched on it a couple of times already. How we are able to support the startups that we are, we're building in a way that allows them then to interact back into the bank. So maybe you can touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, we have a space theme, as you can imagine. So mission control fits nicely into that. But effectively, to your point, what mission control is a team of people across the different aspects of what it takes to build a venture. So risk management, legal services, cybersecurity, all those things that actually we need to get right, so that when we then take the ventures that we work with back into CBA and say, look, we'd like to distribute some of these amazing propositions to CBA customers, we can stand behind that. What I mean by that is some of the requirements, absolutely fair requirements from the group, probably more than what you would expect if you were sitting as, and we work building a startup. We need to make sure that we have 15 million customers. We need to treat them with the respect they deserve in terms of the data privacy, in terms of ensuring that we create right propositions for them and add value to their lives. So part of that then means that we need to help these ventures within X15 design their product or proposition at a level that meets CBA's requirements, but we want to make sure that they do that in a way that still keeps them agile. And so what Mission Control does is it helps these ventures focus on their business, focus on their proposition, while making sure that we provide that handshake with the right people within CBA. That's really, I think, the secret sauce of X15, getting that right, making that industrialized in the next 5 years, what we're really excited about.
Yeah, and that's, examples of that are things like, because Supun there talks about it's really important that we have those the way CBA would see products or service being put into the market. So I'll give you an example that sort of is real for lots of people, is things like cybersecurity. CBA has an enormous capability with respect to cybersecurity, an enormous capacity to keep digital products and services and data about consumers safe. Far more than any startup, just definitionally more than any startup. Now, rather than X15 saying, well, listen, we're building startups, so we accept a lower threshold, Mission Control and what you do and the way we interact then with the bank is to ensure, right, let's actually put that protection, that framework in place around startups, even for the first hundreds or thousands of customers.
Yeah.
So that when we've got 10 million customers for a particular product or a particular service, that they know that sort of security is there and has been there from the start.
Absolutely. And Matt touched upon this when he first spoke about this in the morning, in that one of the challenges that CBA has, and we have a lot of advantages, but as one challenge is we have a complex environment. We're a large organization. So, as a startup, you might be thinking, well, we've worked with large corporates before. We know the drill. It takes infinitely longer time to get through procurement or get through cybersecurity or things like that. What we're hoping to achieve out of X15 is how do we create an environment that is new, that is fit for purpose with regards to building ventures, but still meets the requirements of CBA. I think getting that means that hopefully we can move a lot faster potentially than certain things move within the group, but also meet those requirements, as you say, from day one, so that we're setting up these ventures to scale. We don't want these ventures just to serve 1,000 customers. We want them to serve millions of customers, and that's the exciting bit. So maybe I'll change tack a bit to talk about the startup ecosystem, because we have a lot of people, our industry partners who are listening in. You've obviously had a lot of experience in your time at H2Ventures, working with some amazing founders and amazing ventures. What do you see as X15's contribution to the Australian startup ecosystem?
So, the startup ecosystem, and in particular the fintech ecosystem, has grown extraordinarily over the past sort of 5 or 6 years. It's really important to note that, at risk of naming a couple of firms like Blackbird or SquarePeg or One Ventures were really on their own even a decade ago. Australia went through a very dark period post the 2000 tech wreck, for those old enough to remember it, where there really was very little innovation going on in the country and there was no real sense of an ecosystem. About 7 or 8 years ago, the green shoots started to emerge, and then the government, or both sides of government, but Malcolm Turnbull played a big role, really created this sort of sense of energy around technology and its importance. And I think what's been terrific is you've seen this sort of rapid growth of people who suddenly see the idea of being a founder or of working in an entrepreneurial sort of environment as being compelling and exciting for them. And that becomes self-fulfilling. It's important to understand, everyone I think would know of Silicon Valley, a terrific success story around the world, but a success story that's now about 80 years in the making. So let's be clear, you don't build these ecosystems overnight. These things take time. But we have much more than green shoots now. We actually have a vibrant ecosystem. And we've been lucky to be a part of that. CBA's been a part of that all the way through as well, in a couple of different guises. And the thing that I see as changing, and X15 is a really sort of clear example of this, is CBA has traditionally been focused on its internal innovation and has actually been pretty effective at that, but has been a taker rather than a giver into the community. It's been interested in knowing what's going on, but basically all of its innovation was focused internally. There's a very clear recognition across the bank, and I've had the chance to meet with people throughout the bank, from the board, through senior management, and obviously through all of X15, who now clearly understand the interrelationship back into the broader community and the value that brings. The success of economies and ecosystems is entirely built on that network, is entirely built on that almost the sort of pay it back methodology or mentality, which says that if we contribute, we're going to get something back. Now, what does that practically mean for X15? It means that X15, I suspect over the next 5 years, will invest in at least as many external ventures as internal ones. Mm-hmm. It will and is able to develop things internally, and there's some terrifically talented people within the bank who are constantly producing ideas that X15 can consider. But there's an even larger universe of people outside. And for me, part of my reason, part of, frankly, my own due diligence in joining CBA and chairing X15 was forming that level of comfort that X15 is focused on how it can interact in a way that sort of is mutually beneficial. And the whole design of X15, I think, will serve that goal very well. That'll play out over time, but I'm pretty confident in the opportunity and the way it's being tackled.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch upon a word that you often use, authenticity. I think you mentioned a couple of times around the approach, having a degree of authenticity. Do you want to talk a bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. I do. I genuinely see that CBA has built X15 and is pursuing innovation in part through X15 in a very authentic way. Now, I'll use another example, but it'll sort of frame it for you. One of the most successful corporate venture businesses is a US firm called Intel, which designs computer chips very successfully for many decades. Intel Capital, for 40 years now, has been an incredibly successful corporate venturing arm within Intel. One of the reasons it has worked so well is their mandate from the start has been, we're interested in businesses that need chips that we have not yet worked out how to build. And so it's got a very natural kind of synergy back to the firm, because their investments are also necessarily their future customers, and so they're helping them design the future chips. That synergy is really important. Now, bringing that back to CBA, the authenticity to me is it would not make any sense for CBA to set up an external fund. Some organisations do that. It makes sense for some organisations. That would not be authentic. For CBA, with such a strong internal innovation sort of culture, mindset, DNA, it's really important that CBA leverages that in the way it's designed X15, and that is exactly what it's done. The design of X15 is to pursue opportunities, both internal and external, that resonate with the mission control, or what we call the X stack internally, that sort of tree trunk, which allows us to interact back with the bank and do so safely and do so in a way that the bank really supports. Now, that's not the only way to do it. For other organisations, other ways may make sense. For CBA, that is the authentic way to tackle this, and I think that authenticity will underpin success.
Yeah, absolutely. And my personal reflection on that, in talking about it being authentic, we are our own startup, right? And we've talked about this since you've been on board. There's a lot of things we don't know, but we're working through how we get that handshake right. And what X15 might look like in terms of the model in a year's time might be slightly different, because we're using our existing ventures and some of the opportunities externally to understand how do we make sure that we stay authentic to helping those ventures scale. We don't have all those answers today.
No, I agree, and I really like referring to X15 as a startup. I think it permissions us to recognise that we don't have to have all the answers. It also permissions us to experiment, to try things, to test things. One of the sort of the goals that's out in the marketplace is that X15 aims to invest in 25 ventures over the next 5 years. I say with great confidence that not all 25 will be spectacularly successful. I think one of the things for us will be actually ones that aren't successful, ones that really aren't working, is to be able to step away from those. Because really the goal at the end of the day is to produce a series of future growth engines for CBA Group. I have a view that a decade from now, there may well not be an X15, because X15 is effectively what CBA itself has morphed into. It has become an organisation that's able to reshape itself, is able to develop those new initiatives, build out those new ventures, aka business lines, new products, new services for customers, is able to reshape itself. That is the beauty of X15. It represents a sort of a scout as to strategically where the group as a whole is able to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no doubt, you've worked with a lot of amazing founders, engineers, developers, designers in your experience at H2. We might have some of them listening to this, and if they were thinking, well, what if I wanted to join X15 and be part of building a venture with X15? What would you say? What would you say to them to bring them on board?
No, good question. Look, first things first. Founders self-select for independence. Founders self-select for having a reasonably high risk tolerance. They're willing to take chances. They're willing to sort of back themselves. Interestingly, founders, the best founders, are not nearly as risk-taking. They're more risk-adverse than you might first think. It's just they see the world in a different way to others. So others kind of look at what they're doing and say, actually, that's really high risk. I'll use a well-known example, Elon Musk, who does a bunch of things. But one example is building out Tesla. Now, an incredibly risky thing in most of our eyes to do. In Elon's eyes, I'm quite sure, he sort of looked at the opportunity and said, listen, electric cars are definitely the wave of the future. The big car companies are definitely going to struggle to do it. This is actually a low-risk bet. To me, what's interesting, and to me the opportunity for a founder in considering X15 is, has X15 now created an environment where I can do what I want to do? I'll have the sort of the degrees of freedom, the agility. I'll have the ability to sort of participate in the upside of what I'm building. But with things that I can never have independently. I can never have that sort of that ability to scale at the speed of that X15 is able to assist businesses to scale. It won't be right for everyone. That's absolutely certain. But I think for some founders, actually X15 becomes a really interesting new potential partner on the block, and one I'm pretty sure that everyone will be paying attention to, and we certainly hope that some will come and see how we can work with them.
So we're here to celebrate our 1-year birthday in 2 weeks, actually. And we've now changed into a new year. We've got 2021 ahead of us. A year from now, when you and I are sitting here having another fireside chat, what's your hope for what X15 would have achieved?
So, X15 will certainly will certainly achieve a series of goals over the next 12 months. We'll certainly make some new investments. We announced Doshi today, terrifically exciting one, and one that's an example of that external type of investment. We'll make some new investments. We'll make an awful lot of ground behind the veil within your world, within mission control and within the build out of our X stack. That won't be as clear to people. And this is a little bit the thing. It's like I have a bunch of kids. I have 5 little kids. You don't actually see them grow over days or weeks. Not necessarily over 12 months, but then you have a look at photos from a few years past and you sort of, actually they've moved a long way. We will move enormously forward within X15 over the next 12 months. But it's going to be a little bit like the skyscraper coming out of the ground. We're working on the foundations at the moment. You'll start to see elements of those foundations come up, but it'll take a little bit more time than 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. In 12 months' time, if, as you said, we've expanded our portfolio but had a lot of learnings along the way, as a startup, in this true startup style, we probably would have pivoted more than a dozen times, but banking those learnings to set ourselves up for the 5 years ahead of us.
Well, that's the entry. I mean, that's the question, is what do we look like in 5 years? And that's where it gets really exciting, because as much as I say you won't necessarily see a lot of movement over 12 months, I'm equally sure we underestimate what X15 will look like 5 years from now. I actually get pretty excited by that. And I expect that there will be several, I won't put a number on several, but there'll be several really exciting businesses that started life in X15 and that have become really quite meaningful to the bank and to the Australian ecosystem, to the consumer and the services they can access more broadly. That's the exciting piece. That's where the real opportunity is.
Absolutely. So with that, I think we're at time. Ben, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. And we'll go to the next session now.